The company Christmas party was a whirlwind of glitter and cheer. Fairy lights twinkled like tiny stars, reflecting off shiny ornaments that hung from every corner. Laughter and the clinking of glasses filled the air, mixing with the sweet smell of pine and gingerbread. Everyone seemed to be having a grand time, chatting happily and sharing festive smiles. Everyone, that is, except for Sarah. She stood near a window, holding a glass of sparkling cider that she hadn't touched. Her eyes, usually bright, were downcast, tracing patterns on the frosty pane. The festive sounds around her felt like a distant hum, not quite reaching her. A heavy cloud seemed to follow her, making the vibrant colors of the party look dull. She felt small and out of place, like a forgotten decoration in a room full of new, shiny ones. Then, her gaze drifted across the room, past the dancing shadows and happy faces. Her heart gave a little lurch. There he was, her ex-husband, Mark. He was easy to spot, always so loud and full of himself. But it wasn't just Mark who caught her eye. Beside him stood a woman with hair like spun gold and a laugh that seemed to demand attention. Tiffany. Mark's new girlfriend. She was draped in a shimmering red dress that hugged her perfectly, making her stand out like a bright, burning star. Sarah watched as Tiffany leaned in, whispering something in Mark's ear, making him throw his head back and roar with laughter. They looked like they belonged on the cover of a fancy magazine, completely in their own world. Sarah felt a familiar ache spread through her chest, a quiet sadness that the joyful party couldn't chase away. The small ache in Sarah's chest sharpened into a familiar sting as Mark and Tiffany decided to make their presence truly known. They weren't just at the party, they were the party, or at least they wanted everyone to think so. Mark's booming laugh cut through the general hum of conversation, louder than before, pulling eyes toward them like magnets. Tiffany, with her dazzling red dress and bright smile, seemed to amplify his energy. She tossed her golden hair and laughed along with him, a high, tinkling sound that echoed a little too much in the festive hall. They moved through the crowd with an air of ownership, as if the whole room was their stage. Mark gestured grandly with his hands as he spoke, catching the attention of anyone who dared to look away. He made sure to stop and greet people loudly, always with Tiffany by his side, her hand often resting lightly on his arm or back. Each greeting felt like a performance, a careful display of their happiness and togetherness. Sarah watched from her quiet corner, feeling a familiar wave of shame wash over her. It was the same feeling she'd had when they divorced, when everyone had looked at her with pity, wondering what she'd done wrong. Now, seeing Mark parade Tiffany around, it felt like a fresh wound. She felt a knot tighten in her stomach. Every loud laugh, every public touch, every sparkling glance between Mark and Tiffany felt like a deliberate jab, meant just for her. It was as if they were shouting, "Look at us. Look at what you lost." The joy of the party, which had already seemed distant, now felt completely out of reach. She just wanted the ground to open up and swallow her whole. As if their grand entrance wasn't enough, Mark decided to turn up the volume on his performance. He steered Tiffany through the crowd, making a beeline for a group of people standing rather close to Sarah's quiet corner. Sarah tried to shrink further into the shadows, hoping to become invisible, but it was no use. Mark's voice, already loud, grew even louder as he began to brag about Tiffany. "You know, Tiffany just closed the biggest deal of the quarter," he announced, his voice carrying easily over the festive music. He looked around, making sure he had everyone's attention, and especially Sarah's. "She's a real go-getter, not afraid to take risks. That's what I admire most." He patted Tiffany's back with a flourish, and she smiled sweetly, though her eyes flickered towards Sarah for a split second. Then he continued, "And her new art gallery opening next month? It's going to be huge. She's got such a keen eye for talent, you wouldn't believe it." He rattled off more of Tiffany's achievements, each one sounding grander than the last. He spoke of exotic trips they had planned, expensive gifts he had bought her, and the exciting, busy life they led together. Every word was like a small dart, aimed directly at Sarah. Sarah felt her cheeks burn. She knew Mark was doing this on purpose. He was trying to highlight Tiffany's shining success against her own perceived failures, making her feel small and insignificant. It was a cruel game, one he had played before, but never so publicly. He wanted everyone to compare them, to see how much better Tiffany was, how much more exciting her life seemed. The familiar sting deepened into a hot, angry ache. She gripped her glass tighter, wishing she could find a hole to crawl into, far away from Mark's triumphant voice and Tiffany's knowing glances. The hot, angry ache in Sarah's chest was now a burning flush that spread across her face and neck. She could feel the heat radiating from her skin, a physical manifestation of her embarrassment. Mark's booming voice, praising Tiffany, felt like a spotlight shining directly on her, exposing all her insecurities for everyone to see. She didn't dare look up, convinced that every person in the room was now aware of her presence, and worse, aware of her pain. She imagined their eyes on her, not with anger or judgment, but with something far more crushing, pity. Pity was a heavy blanket, smothering and suffocating. It made her feel like a charity case, a person to be looked down upon. She hated it more than anything. The thought of all those sympathetic glances, those whispers about "poor Sarah," made her want to sink into the floorboards and disappear entirely. If only she could vanish, melt into the festive wallpaper, or become just another forgotten ornament. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched her untouched glass. The happy chatter of the party, which moments ago had seemed distant, now felt like a cruel mockery. Every laugh, every joyful exclamation, seemed to highlight her own deep unhappiness. She wished she had never come, wished she had stayed home where she could hide from the world and its judging eyes. This party, meant to be a celebration, had become her personal torment. The air felt thick, heavy with unspoken comparisons and silent judgments. All she wanted was to escape, to be anywhere but here, under the imagined gaze of pitying eyes. Just as Sarah was about to make her quiet escape, hoping to slip out unnoticed, something shifted in the room. The loud chatter, the clinking of glasses, Mark's booming voice, it all seemed to fade, as if someone had slowly turned down the volume. A hush began to fall, starting from the grand entrance and spreading outward like a ripple across a pond. Sarah, still focused on her misery, barely registered the change at first. But then, a subtle shift in the light caught her eye. She looked up, half expecting to see a new group of latecomers, perhaps another couple eager to join the festive cheer. What she saw instead made her breath catch. The heavy oak doors to the ballroom, which had been firmly shut for a while, slowly swung open again. For a moment, a bright light from the hallway poured in, framing a figure in its glow. And then, she stepped in. It wasn't just a woman, it was a vision. She moved with an easy grace, her head held high, radiating a quiet strength that filled the room. Her dress, a deep emerald green, shimmered with every step, catching the light in a way that made her look like she was sparkling from within. Her hair was styled perfectly, framing a face that was both beautiful and kind, yet held a new, unshakable confidence. She wasn't just dressed up, she was transformed. A collective gasp, soft and almost unheard, swept through the room. Conversations died out completely. Mark, mid-sentence about Tiffany's latest triumph, trailed off, his mouth slightly open. Tiffany, who had been preening, suddenly looked small and unsure. Every single eye in the room, from the waiters to the CEO, was fixed on this stunning woman who had just walked in, owning the space with every confident stride. The air crackled with surprise and a sudden, shared curiosity. Sarah's gaze, still fixed on the doorway, sharpened. The beautiful woman was walking further into the room, and with each elegant step, a piece of Sarah's confusion chipped away, replaced by a jolt of recognition. It couldn't be. Her mind raced, trying to put the pieces together. The emerald dress, the confident stride, the radiant smile. Then, it hit her. It was Emily. Her best friend, Emily. But not the Emily she knew. This Emily was different, transformed. Sarah had seen Emily just last week, and while Emily was always pretty, she had never looked like this. Tonight, Emily looked like she had stepped right off a movie screen. Her hair, usually in a simple ponytail or soft waves, was now a cascade of glossy curls that bounced with every movement. Her makeup was subtle but perfect, making her eyes sparkle with an inner light Sarah hadn't noticed before. The emerald dress wasn't just a dress, it was a statement, tailored to perfection, highlighting a figure that seemed to have been sculpted by angels. Emily carried herself with a new kind of power, a quiet confidence that radiated from her like a warm glow. She wasn't trying to be noticed, she simply was noticeable. Sarah felt a mix of disbelief and overwhelming joy. Her best friend, her rock, had arrived like a supernova, stealing the spotlight from everyone else in the room, including Mark and Tiffany. It was like watching a caterpillar turn into a butterfly, but a butterfly so magnificent it made all the other insects look dull. The pity Sarah had felt just moments ago for herself vanished, replaced by a surge of pride for her friend. Emily looked absolutely stunning, like a true movie star gracing a red carpet, and the entire room was mesmerized. The hush that had fallen over the party was absolute, and in that silence, all eyes followed Emily as she glided gracefully into the room. Mark, who moments ago had been a picture of proud self-importance, now looked utterly stunned. His jaw had literally dropped, hanging slightly open as he stared at Emily. The confident smirk that usually played on his lips was gone, replaced by a look of pure shock, almost disbelief. It was as if he'd seen a ghost, or perhaps someone he never expected to see looking so magnificent. Beside him, Tiffany's reaction was a stark contrast to Mark's open-mouthed wonder. Her perfectly made-up face tightened, and a small, almost invisible frown creased her brow. The bright, confident sparkle in her eyes dimmed, replaced by a flicker of annoyance and perhaps a hint of jealousy. She had been the center of attention, the glamorous new girlfriend, and now someone else had effortlessly stolen her spotlight. Her shoulders stiffened, and she subtly pulled her hand away from Mark's arm, clearly displeased by his gaping admiration of the newcomer. Neither Mark nor Tiffany said a word. They simply stood there, frozen, their carefully constructed aura of superiority crumbling under Emily's radiant presence. The air around them, which had previously buzzed with their self-proclaimed importance, now felt cold and empty. Emily hadn't even acknowledged them, yet her mere entrance had managed to deflate their entire performance. It was a silent, powerful shift, and Sarah, watching from her vantage point, felt a small, triumphant smile begin to form on her lips. For once, Mark wasn't the one commanding the room, and Tiffany wasn't the unchallenged queen. With the entire Emily's warm hug was like a shield, protecting Sarah from the lingering stares and Mark's shocked face. Sarah buried her face in Emily's shoulder, a mix of relief and surprise washing over her. When Emily finally pulled back a little, her eyes, sparkling with kindness, met Sarah's. "You look absolutely amazing, you know that?" Emily whispered, her voice soft but firm, meant only for Sarah's ears. "But more importantly, you are amazing. Don't let anyone make you forget that, not for a second." She gave Sarah's arm a gentle squeeze, a silent promise of support. The simple words, spoken with such genuine warmth, were like a soothing balm on Sarah's bruised heart. All the hurt, the embarrassment, the pity she had felt, began to melt away. For the first time that night, a real, unforced smile bloomed on Sarah's face. It wasn't a fake smile for the party, or a polite smile for a coworker, it was a smile of true happiness and relief. It started small, a gentle curving of her lips, then spread to her eyes, making them sparkle with a light that had been missing all evening. Emily then added, a mischievous twinkle in her eye, "Besides, darling, you know my rule, always show up. Especially when they least expect it." Sarah let out a soft laugh, a sound she hadn't realized she was holding back. The tension that had coiled in her shoulders for hours finally released. Emily's presence, her beauty, and her unwavering friendship had turned the tide. Sarah no longer felt like disappearing. Instead, she felt a renewed strength, standing tall beside her stunning best friend. The party might still be buzzing, but for Sarah, the cruel spotlight had been replaced by the warm glow of genuine connection. After her quiet moment with Sarah, Emily turned her gaze towards Mark and Tiffany. There was no fire in her eyes, no anger or bitterness, just a calm, clear strength that seemed to shine from deep within her. It was the kind of strength that didn't need to shout to be heard, a quiet power that commanded respect without demanding it. Her smile remained, gentle and genuine, but it held a new layer of cool composure when it landed on them. Mark, still somewhat dazed, looked like a deer caught in headlights. Tiffany, on the other hand, had regained some of her composure, though a hint of irritation still flickered in her eyes. Emily didn't linger on their discomfort. Instead, she offered a small, polite nod, her voice clear and steady, reaching them without needing to be loud. "Merry Christmas, Mark." "Tiffany," she said, her tone perfectly even, without a trace of warmth or chill. It was a formal greeting, a simple acknowledgement, and nothing more. There was no room for argument, no opening for conversation, and certainly no hint of past grievances. It was a statement of fact, delivered with an unshakable confidence that left no room for misinterpretation. The effect was immediate and profound. Mark, who seemed ready to stammer out some kind of greeting or explanation, found himself unable to speak. Tiffany, who looked like she might offer a frosty reply, just narrowed her eyes and remained silent. Emily hadn't tried to hurt them or win a battle, she had simply acknowledged their presence with an undeniable grace that made their earlier attempts at grandiosity seem hollow and childish. Her polite yet firm words were a boundary, clear and unmoving, and in that moment, everyone in the room understood it. The polite, "Merry Christmas," from Emily had hung in the air, a final, unchallengeable statement. Mark, however, seemed to snap out of his daze, perhaps spurred by Tiffany's growing impatience beside him. He took a hesitant step forward, a forced smile appearing on his face, trying to regain some control over the situation. "Emily, wow, you look incredible," he stammered, his eyes darting from her to Sarah, then back again. "I didn't even recognize you. How have you been? It's been a while." He tried to sound casual, but his voice was a little too high, a little too eager. He seemed to be fishing for a longer conversation, perhaps an explanation for her sudden, dazzling appearance, or even a chance to insert himself back into the spotlight. Emily simply smiled, a kind, unhurried smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. It was a smile that acknowledged his words without inviting further discussion. She didn't offer any details about her life, didn't ask about his, and certainly didn't give him the opening he seemed to be searching for. Her gaze remained steady, reflecting a calm wisdom that left Mark feeling strangely exposed. "It's good to see you're doing well, Mark," she replied smoothly, her voice still gentle but with an underlying firmness that left no room for doubt. It was a pleasantry, a social grace, but it was also a definitive end to the interaction. She offered no more, no less. It was a complete sentence, requiring no follow-up, and it was delivered with such finality that even Mark, for all his bluster, understood. He stood there, awkwardly, realizing he had been politely but firmly dismissed. With Mark and Tiffany effectively sidelined, their brief moment of awkwardness past, Emily gently took Sarah's arm. "Come on," she whispered, her eyes twinkling, "let's find something stronger than cider and catch up properly." They drifted away from the main cluster of people, finding a quieter spot near a beautifully decorated fireplace. The rest of the night became a blur of happy conversation and genuine laughter for Sarah. Emily told her all about her new job in a different city, the exciting projects she was working on, and the wonderful new friends she had made. Sarah, in turn, found herself opening up, sharing her own experiences, both good and bad, without the usual filter of self-consciousness. Emily listened with rapt attention, her eyes full of understanding and support. She didn't offer pity, but instead, encouraging words and practical advice that made Sarah feel seen and valued. They talked about everything and nothing, from funny memories of their college days to dreams for the future. The weight that had been pressing down on Sarah for so long lifted completely, replaced by a lightness she hadn't felt in ages. Mark and Tiffany, who had been trying to regain their former glory by loudly engaging with other guests, soon faded into the background for Sarah. Their attempts to be the center of attention seemed distant and unimportant. Sarah and Emily were in their own happy bubble, completely absorbed in their rekindled connection. The festive lights around them seemed to shine brighter, and the music sounded sweeter. For Sarah, the party had transformed from a place of torment into a haven of friendship and joy, thanks to Emily's timely arrival and unwavering presence. They laughed, they shared stories, and for the first time in a long time, Sarah felt truly happy and at peace. As the night went on, a subtle shift occurred in the atmosphere of the Christmas party. The earlier tension, the quiet whispers about Sarah, had faded away. Now, a different kind of buzz was forming. People couldn't help but notice Sarah. She was no longer shrinking into the shadows, but was instead animated, her face glowing with genuine smiles as she talked with Emily. Her laughter, light and free, carried across the room, a stark contrast to the quiet sadness she had worn earlier. Guests, who had initially been captivated by Tiffany's flashy entrance, found their eyes drifting towards Sarah and Emily. They saw the easy companionship, the shared jokes, the deep connection between the two women. It was clear that Sarah was no longer the poor ex-wife, but a woman surrounded by warmth and true friendship. Her transformation, while not as dramatic as Emily's physical glow-up, was just as profound, shining from within. Meanwhile, Mark and Tiffany were starting to look increasingly out of place. Their attempts to be the life of the party seemed forced and a little desperate. Mark kept glancing over at Sarah and Emily, a bewildered look on his face, as if he couldn't quite understand why the attention had shifted away from him. Tiffany, ever sensitive to being outshone, grew more visibly annoyed. Her smiles became tighter, her gestures less confident. The effortless charm she had displayed earlier had evaporated, replaced by a growing discomfort. It was becoming clear to everyone that while Sarah had found happiness and peace, Mark and Tiffany were struggling to maintain their facade of perfect joy. The balance of the room had irrevocably shifted. From across the room, Mark couldn't tear his eyes away from Sarah and Emily. The way Sarah laughed, a sound so genuine and bright, struck him deeply. It was a laugh he hadn't heard from her in years, certainly not during the last strained months of their marriage. He watched as Emily leaned in, whispering something that made Sarah giggle, her head thrown back in pure delight. The warmth and easy happiness between them were undeniable, a stark contrast to the brittle, forced cheer he felt with Tiffany. A cold, hard knot formed in Mark's stomach. He saw Sarah, not as the sad, defeated woman he had tried to humiliate earlier, but as a vibrant, joyful person, full of life and light. He saw the true, unburdened happiness he once shared with her, the kind that didn't need to be announced or proven, but simply existed. He remembered quiet evenings filled with laughter, simple joys, and a deep understanding that he had carelessly thrown away. The glamour and excitement he sought with Tiffany now felt hollow, a loud performance rather than true connection. He realized, with a sickening lurch, that he hadn't just lost a wife, he had lost a partner who genuinely cared for him, who understood him, and who, despite everything, still held a beautiful light within her. The mistake wasn't just letting Sarah go, it was underestimating her strength, her ability to find joy again, and the profound, simple happiness he had once been a part of. The sight of Sarah's radiant smile, truly happy, was a bitter pill to swallow, a crushing realization of what he had truly forfeited. Tiffany had been watching Mark, her initial annoyance turning into irritation as his gaze lingered on Sarah and Emily. She saw the way his eyes followed Sarah's genuine laughter, the way his jaw was clenched, and the troubled look on his face. It was clear to her that his attention was completely diverted from her, the woman he was supposed to be flaunting. "Mark, are you even listening to me?" Tiffany snapped, her voice sharper than usual. She had been trying to engage him in conversation, recounting a story about a new client, but he was clearly not paying attention. Mark startled, tearing his eyes away from Sarah and Emily with a visible effort. "What?" "Oh, yes, sorry, Tiffany. Just lost in thought." He tried to offer a reassuring smile, but it felt thin and forced, a pale imitation of his earlier boisterous cheer. "Lost in thought, or lost staring at your ex-wife?" Tiffany retorted, her voice low but laced with accusation. Her face was tight, her carefully constructed glamour cracking under the strain. "Honestly, Mark, it's embarrassing. We came here to have a good time, to show everyone how well we're doing, and all you can do is gawk at them." She gestured subtly towards Sarah and Emily, her eyes flashing with anger. Mark's guilt quickly morphed into defensiveness. "I wasn't gawking. I was just observing. And what's it to you anyway? They're hardly bothering anyone." "They're bothering me," Tiffany hissed back, her voice barely a whisper but full of venom. "You're supposed to be with me, celebrating us. But you're acting like you regret something." The accusation hung in the air, sharp and undeniable. Their hushed argument quickly grew heated, their faces reddening, their perfect Christmas facade crumbling for all to see. As the Christmas party began to wind down, Sarah felt a profound sense of lightness she hadn't experienced in a very long time. The heavy cloak of sadness and embarrassment that had wrapped around her earlier in the evening was completely gone, replaced by a feeling of joy and liberation. She walked out of the ballroom, not with her head down, but with a confident stride, Emily by her side. The crisp night air felt refreshing against her cheeks. The glittering lights of the city seemed to reflect the sparkle in her own eyes. Emily's arm was linked through hers, a comforting and powerful presence. They chatted easily as they made their way out, sharing one last laugh about a silly story Emily had just told. Sarah felt incredibly strong. It wasn't a physical strength, but an inner fortitude, a knowing that she was valuable and loved, not for what she could do for someone else, but for who she was. Emily's unwavering friendship had reminded her of that. She felt a deep sense of self-worth that had been chipped away over the years, now fully restored and shining brightly. The whole ordeal with Mark and Tiffany, which had once threatened to ruin her night, now felt like a distant, insignificant memory. It was just a small bump on a much larger, more exciting road. She knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that she was surrounded by genuine love and support. As she stepped into the night, hand in hand with her best friend, Sarah felt ready for anything, her heart full and her spirit soaring. The night that had started so terribly had ended with a beautiful gift, the rediscovery of her own strength and happiness. While Sarah and Emily departed with light hearts, the mood was decidedly different for Mark and Tiffany. Their earlier argument had cast a long, unpleasant shadow over the rest of their evening. Tiffany, still fuming from Mark's distracted behavior and the sudden shift in attention, barely spoke to him. Her glamorous facade had completely crumbled, replaced by a sullen expression and tight lips. Mark, for his part, was lost in a swirl of regret and unease. The image of Sarah's genuine, radiant smile kept replaying in his mind, a stark contrast to Tiffany's growing displeasure. He tried to smooth things over, to reclaim the festive atmosphere they had initially created, but his attempts felt hollow and unconvincing. The joy he had hoped to flaunt had evaporated, leaving behind a bitter taste. As the party officially ended, they made a quiet exit, a far cry from their grand entrance. There were no booming laughs, no confident gestures, no lingering looks from admirers. Tiffany walked a step ahead, her red dress now seeming less vibrant and more like a symbol of a night gone wrong. Mark followed, his shoulders slumped, his earlier swagger completely gone. Their fancy night out, meant to impress and perhaps hurt, had backfired spectacularly. It had ended not with triumphant joy, but with a quiet, simmering resentment between them, a clear indication that their evening had been thoroughly ruined. The car ride home was filled with a thick, uncomfortable silence, punctuated only by Tiffany's occasional huffs of frustration. The morning after the Christmas party dawned bright and clear, but for Sarah, the brightness wasn't just from the winter sun. She woke up with a feeling she hadn't experienced in years, a profound sense of peace. The lingering sting of Mark's public display and Tiffany's ostentatious glamour had completely vanished, replaced by a quiet, steady warmth in her chest. As she sipped her coffee, she thought back to the previous night, not with the familiar cringe of embarrassment, but with a gentle smile. Emily's presence, her kind words, and her unwavering support had been a powerful shield. Sarah realized that the pity she had imagined in others' eyes was just a reflection of her own insecurity. Now, she felt strong. She understood that her worth wasn't tied to Mark's approval or anyone else's perception. The transformation wasn't just about feeling better, it was about truly knowing her own value. She was kind, resilient, and capable of deep connection, as Emily had so beautifully reminded her. The events of the party, particularly Emily's stunning arrival and the genuine joy they shared, had solidified this realization. It was as if a heavy fog had lifted, revealing a clear path forward. Sarah felt a quiet confidence bloom within her, a certainty that she was enough, just as she was. The pain of the past still existed, but it no longer defined her. She knew her true value, and that knowledge was a precious gift, far more valuable than any fleeting attention or superficial glamour. Later that day, Sarah's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and saw Mark's name flashing. A tiny flicker of the old hurt, the old fear, tried to surface, but it was quickly extinguished by the new sense of peace she carried. She remembered the look on his face last night, the dawning realization of what he had lost, and a quiet smile touched her lips. He called again a few minutes later, and then a third time. Sarah simply let the calls go to voicemail. There was no anger, no desire for revenge, just a calm certainty that she didn't need to engage. The need to prove anything to him, or to herself through him, was gone. His calls were a ghost from a past she had gracefully left behind. She imagined what he might say, an apology, perhaps, or an attempt to explain away his behavior. Maybe he even wanted to see if the spark was still there, if he could rekindle something he now regretted losing. But Sarah knew better. That part of her life was over, neatly closed like a finished chapter. She had moved on, not just physically or emotionally, but in her very soul. The thought of answering, of letting his words disturb her newfound tranquility, felt like a step backward. She was too busy moving forward, building a life filled with genuine happiness and true connections. The ring of her phone eventually stopped, leaving only the peaceful hum of her day. Sarah smiled, knowing this silence was far more valuable than any conversation she could have with Mark. She was free. The next morning, as Sarah basked in her newfound peace, her phone rang. It wasn't Mark this time, but Emily, her voice bright and full of cheer. "Hey, my superstar. How about we make our own Christmas plans? Forget the office drama, let's have a proper, joyful Christmas. Just us, maybe some good food, and absolutely no need for dazzling entrances or awkward exes." Sarah laughed, a clear, happy sound that resonated with her inner contentment. "That sounds perfect, Emily. More than perfect." They began brainstorming ideas, their conversation flowing easily, painting a picture of a Christmas filled with warmth, laughter, and genuine connection. They talked about cozy sweaters, classic Christmas movies, baking cookies, and exchanging thoughtful gifts. It was a vision of a holiday built on true friendship, far removed from the superficial showmanship of the previous night. As they planned, Sarah felt a deep sense of gratitude for Emily, for her timely arrival, her unwavering support, and for reminding Sarah of her own strength. This Christmas wouldn't be about trying to impress anyone, or healing old wounds, or proving a point. It would simply be about celebrating friendship, self-worth, and the quiet joy of being truly present with someone you loved. The drama of the company party, Mark's attempts to humiliate her, and his eventual regret, all faded into the background. Sarah's Christmas, surrounded by real joy and the love of a true friend, was going to be wonderful. It was a beautiful, peaceful ending to a journey of self-discovery, showing that the best glow-up is the one that happens within.